Chapter 41. Clarification: you are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Qi Shuyan frowned. She actually didn't quite understand what kind of hatred and grudge Feng Yanli had with her. She released her death grip and crossed her arms across her chest, then said coldly without whitewashing the false peace, "I don't know why you're saying all these things, are we that close?" Feng Yanli's face stiffened and immediately said pitifully, "Shuyan, I didn't mean it." Yeah, I know you didn't mean it, because we aren't close at all." Qi Shuyan nodded. Feng Yanli was about to argue. Qi Shuyan interrupted, "Feng Yanli, the last time I helped you, I got bullied on campus instead, but you've always watched indifferently. I was pushed down the reservoir when I went there with you, and almost died, yet you never came to see me in the hospital. I understand when you said you were busy, but this time I got kicked out of a class and you didn't seem to take exception to it either. So, what kind of friend are you to me?" Qi Shuyan felt increasingly amused the more she spoke, but the smile didn't reach her eyes, instead there was only the coldness of a blizzard. "Shuyan, so is this how you see me? I'm quite carefree in nature, I didn't know you felt that way." Feng Yanli looked grieved and hurt. "Carefree? Then, you'd better change this habit here." Qi Shuyan showed her phone screen in a matter-of-fact way. "Look, you've only been here a few minutes and talked drivel and dumped another load of sh*t on me. Thank you. Shuyan, I really didn't mean to." "Oh, if you didn't mean it, then I'm even more afraid of making friends with someone with your IQ, Qi Shuyan said with unforgotten trepidation on her face. Qi Shuyan's words had just fallen when a senior student in class 5 cracked up, followed by others, laughing and snickering discreetly. Although everyone was writing their homework with their heads down, their ears were perked up, secretly listening to Qi Shuyan's movements. Feng Yanli's face was completely stiff, bruised and white, choked speechless by Qi Shuyan's comeback. What the hell did she mean by that? Did that mean she was stupid if she wasn't intentional? Eyes drifted in all directions and landed on her, and she thought they were sympathizing with her. She was about to squeeze out a few heartbroken tears to gain sympathy, but when she saw the strange looks from the crowd, only then did she realize that they were looking at her like she was a monkey, which in a word had absolutely nothing to do with sympathy. Even with a few streaks of contempt. It was a hell of a way for people to feel sorry for her. They didn't feel much when Feng Yanli was speaking just now, but when Qi Shuyan spoke, it quickly dawned on them. She was clearly discrediting her and adding insult to her injury in the guise of a friend. Feng Yanli reddened from their gazes and ran away with her tail between her legs. After school, Gao Lingxue suddenly blocked Qi Shuyan. She yapped, questioning why Qi Shuyan wasn't home often, and that her parents were looking for her. It should have been fine on other days, but at this juncture, it was akin to pouring fuel on the fire. Many in the school knew that Gao Lingxue was Qi Shuyan's cousin, so they were somewhat convinced of the contents on the forum. A large wave of onlookers watched the show, their eyes thick with derision and scorn. Qi Shuyan was no pushover and directly pointed out that Gao Lingxue wasn't really related to her family, yet she ate their food and used their things. Qi Shuyan's quick-witted retorts drove Gao Lingxue into declaring, "Then never come back to my house." Qi Shuyan was really surprised. It turned out that in Gao Lingxue's eyes, she was dying to live in her house. But Qi Shuyan treated all of this as an insignificant episode. Early the next day, Qi Shuyan saw that her Taobao store had passed the evaluation, so she uploaded several photos of talisman products, divided into categories, as well as several types of jade pendants with magic array engravings. Qi Shuyan held her chin in her hand and mused. Although these talismans couldn't compare to the works she drew in her past life, they were also superior and genuine. However, considering that she wasn't famous enough, she contemplated for a moment before quickly pricing the safety talisman at 8,000, the sickness ward talisman at 9,000, the ghost ward talisman at 10,000, and so on. After Qi Shuyan finished filling out the system and uploading her product page, she packed her bag and left the house. She didn't really want to go to school at all the more because of the annoying things going on. Sure enough, as she made her way to school, there were more judging and scathing looks far and near. She endured these eyes until the end of the second period between classes. An exception was made today, where physical education lessons were cancelled. Students were given an extra 25-minute break, so many students were ecstatic. Qi Shuyan finished her homework and intended to lie for a brief nap on her desk, when she suddenly heard a loud squeal. Many students swarmed towards the corridor, and even Li Xiaoting and Jing Shujun shoved in to watch the fun. Qi Shuyan didn't think much about it, and thought it was a leader inspection. Just lying for a moment, Li Xiaoting started screaming in excitement. "Wow, Shuyan, come and see. There's some luxury cars driving in." Li Xiaoting poked Qi Shuyan. "Oh. Shuyan, even someone like me who hasn't seen much, can recognize them. That one looks like a red Ferrari and that one's a blue Lamborghini. They cost hundreds of thousands and millions." Jing Shujun also pulled Qi Shuyan. "It'd be a pity to not go and see them." "Go ahead, I'm not really interested." Qi Shuyan chuckled. "That's it." Li Xiaoting sighed and pushed the excited Jing Shujun. "Go see and take some more pictures for us. I'll stay here with Shuyan." Jing Shujun clenched her fists. "You wait, I'll show you the highest definition pictures I've taken later." She stomped excitedly and ran off. "You don't have to stay behind to keep me company." Qi Shuyan smiled. Jing Shujun was a little quieter than Li Xiaoting, but with her so excited like this, Li Xiaoting had to be dying to go outside and take a look. "That won't work. You're uncomfortable, so how can I have fun?" Li Xiaoting firmly sat down. 5 minutes later. Qi Shuyan looked at a certain someone, who was blushing and giddy with excitement as she kept swiping on the forum, with a black face. "I feel pained with your agreement. Don't you feel upset?" Qi Shuyan smiled faintly. It wasn't easy for a crazy character like Li Xiaoting to listen to her and willingly sit to keep her company. With her poor musical energy, she had never spoken so vivaciously. She was dismissive, but stuck at heart. Shuyan, the ID of the person who posted those allegations about you has been hung up. His sock puppet has been blown out and someone else posted on the forum to make clarifications." Li Xiaoting was pleasantly surprised and blurted incoherently, "The previous posts were deleted and this clarification is so clear. Cut. But what are these people saying? You have a secret backer." Qi Shuyan nodded, knowing that it must have been the people from Su Yeren, who helped her out. They had a wider network, so they could definitely deal with this kind of thing more neatly than she could. Besides, she didn't have much energy for it right now. With exam preparations on the one hand and opening a store on the other, it was already a feat that she hadn't yet collapsed. She took a few glances and the clarification of the rumors above was clearer than the previous real and fake pictures. The real and fake pictures were circled out and the analysis was sharp and on point, even clearer than the previous rumors. And the last line was particularly powerful. "There will be no tolerance for this premeditated slander and defamation. See you in court." With a stamped subpoena thrown out. Qi Shuyan looked awkwardly at this subpoena, which was simply more serious than a celebrity PR. Su Yeren and the others might have looked frivolous, but she didn't expect them to be so reliable. Sure enough, when people saw the last page, most of them shut up, though some still had questions. Li Xiaoting was also thrilled. "Wow, Shuyan, who exactly do you know? Are they so powerful? Is there really a lawyer?" Qi Shuyan was about to speak when someone knocked softly on the door. She unconsciously turned her head and saw 4 big, handsome guys at the door grinning at her, accompanied by the screams of many girls beside them. Qi Shuyan blinked. Chapter 42. The Living Dead. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Senior Class 1. Young Chin, isn't this your cousin driving the luxury car? He came to see you at school. A female student yelled excitedly as she browsed through a bunch of posts on the forum. Other female students heard her and gathered around to take a look. Wow, young Chin, is that really your elder brother? He's so handsome. You even have such a brother, young Chin. He's so nice to you. Did he come to the school specifically to see you? Young Chin had been lying weakly on the desk, having been scolded by her parents these past few days. They said that because she had offended someone, her uncle, Yang Kongda, had been implicated in a promising joint project that was about to succeed fell into ruins. Her uncle's family didn't want to have any dealings with her family anymore, which made her parents anxious. When she dropped in for an audience, her uncle refused, so she didn't dare to go home these days because her parents would give her an earful whenever they saw her. Moreover, more than half of her allowance had been deducted, so this month had been tight. Her doting cousin, who used to secretly give her money, treated her more indifferently now and would only nod at her when he saw her. Young Chin was grappling with her depression, but when she heard a classmate saying that her cousin had come, her eyes lit up. Her chair clattered backwards when she stood up and she said in surprise, "Really? Did my brother really come to the school to see me?" "Yeah, not only that, but your brother seems to have brought 3 friends with him." That female student's eyes glazed over. "To top it off, your brother's 3 friends are also very handsome, driving 4 luxury cars coming to school. Chin, be sure to introduce us later." Many students in the class had gone to young Chin's birthday party and knew that her family had money. But then, there were also many rich students in the senior class. Still, many feared young Chin, precisely because of the genuine wealthy and influential family backing her. Young Chin was in fact astonished hearing this and walked out in bewilderment. The best friends who played with her brother had to be Su Yeren and several older brothers. If it had been just her cousin alone, she would have been sure he had come for her, but she didn't think that she had this honor. Disgruntled, Yang Hongsheng came over carrying 5 cups of drinks and saw 4 people sitting on the railing beside the basketball court, especially the petite, dainty girl in the middle. He smiled eagerly as he approached her and rudely squeezed his butt in, shoving Su Yeren, who was sitting next to her. He unwrapped a straw, inserted it into the cup, and handed it over respectfully. "Master Qi, here, have some honey grapefruit tea." Qi Shuyan smiled slightly. "Thank you." Yang Hongsheng smiled gently and solicitously. My pleasure, my pleasure." While speaking, he threw the rest of the drinks into the other's arms unceremoniously. "You guys are looking pretty good." Qi Shuyan sipped a mouthful of honey grapefruit tea and said with a smile. "It's thanks to your blessing, Master Qi. If you hadn't stepped in, we really don't know what would have happened." Zhou Kongsheng thanked her sincerely. "It's nothing, really. No trouble at all." Qi Shunyan suddenly swept her eyes over Zhou Kongsheng's face a few times in confusion and said, "It's strange. The female ghost kept saying that you were her husband. Could it be that you resemble her husband a lot?" Zhou Kongsheng smiled dryly, feeling a bit heavy. When that female ghost possessed him, she repeatedly muttered a name. He later checked his genealogy and that name was actually on his family tree, as if he was an ancestor of their Zhou family. "By the way, Master Qi, if a ghost keeps possessing a person, can it bring a dead person back to life?" Yang Hongsheng inquired curiously. Qi Shuyan thought for a moment and shook her head. Under certain conditions, a ghost can indeed live like a human after occupying a body for a long time, but it's not a resurrection. It will require a new body in 20 years. Otherwise, the body will rot. What about that person's soul? Hearing this, Su Yeren also looked over with interest. The soul flies away and scatters. Qi Shuyan was suddenly reminded of something and her eyes grew slightly cold. Zhou Kongsheng, Yang Hongsheng, and the others were horrified. "Second brother, why are you asking this question all of a sudden?" Dong Junming marveled. Oh, because when I went to the hospital to see a friend last time, the young daughter of the Wu family, who was in a coma, woke up. But I felt like something wasn't quite right with her, just like when we were possessed before. Yang Hongxing frowned. Her family thought it was the sequelae of her just waking up. Especially when I looked at her, she was initially deadpan, then she suddenly smiled at me. Looking at her made even my big old gangster heart tremble. It turned out I wasn't the only one who finds her strange, Su Yeren echoed in total agreement. Qi Shuyen lowered her long, thick, curly lashes, concealing the look in her eyes after hearing this. When Zhou Kengsheng noticed Qi Shuyen's silence, he poked Yang Hongsheng and told him to stop talking nonsense. Yang Hongsheng looked nonplussed, but when his eyes fell on Qi Shuyen, he immediately regained consciousness and assured, Master Qi, rest assured. We are absolutely on your side. We're not afraid of that Wu family either. It's just that they did it so cleanly without leaving any evidence, so we could only ferret out the person who posted it. He finished with a hint of remorse. Qi Shuyen shook her head in response, and said very seriously, I really need to thank you for clarifying this matter for me. I'm so busy right now that I feel like my head could explode. Qi Shuyen was truly grateful for them. Leaving aside the fact that she didn't have the energy to deal with the matter right now, even if she did, she wouldn't have been able to make it as watertight as they had. What are you busy with? Su Yeren asked. The college entrance examination and opening a Taobao store, Qi Shuyen said, opening the app on her phone. The others took a glance at her shop. Wow, what a bargain. Master Qi, you're such a shark. How come everything you sold us was so expensive? Yang Hongxing wailed. Last time, it was 50,000 yuan a piece, but it was only a few thousands now. Qi Shuyen felt a bit guilty. It can't be helped. My store is still not famous, so I can only promote it with huge discounts. She was somewhat dejected at this and sighed. These talismans are even better than the ones I drew last time, but surprisingly, there aren't people who can tell good from bad. If I can't get a single order for another day, perhaps I'll have to lower the price a bit more. Qi Shuyen noticed that the four just ignored her and lowered their heads, swiping on their phones. She glanced at them and saw their hands wildly snapping up talismans at lightning speed. Her face turned black. She really wasn't here to advertise. Chapter 43. Prophetic Ability. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Qi Shuyen saw all her products on sale sold out to the four people. Yang Hongsheng and Su Yeren even almost rolled up their sleeves and fought over the remaining talisman. Qi Shuyen was caught between laughter and tears. Take it easy, guys. How many do you want to hoard? Besides, there's a low probability of running into a ghost. Master Qi, don't underestimate yourself. We really aren't making allowances for your business. There are many of us in the family, so a share will be gone at once, Su Yeren said with a smile. Yang Hongsheng also nodded in agreement. My parents went to the temple to ask for talismans and each cost tens of thousands. Although they were somewhat useful, your talismans are far more useful. Take for example my relative not long ago. He asked me for a safety talisman. As a result, he was the only one who was unharmed when several cars were involved in a tailgating accident. The others were more or less injured. You know, from his position, not to mention being injured, he could have died. Is the safety talisman that effective? Then, give me a share. Zhou Kengsheng mostly bought ghost ward talismans. Because of the shadow left from that female ghost's possession, all he bought were ghost ward talismans. Hearing Yang Hongsheng's story, his eyes lit up. He really didn't know that the peace talisman could also prevent car accidents. Yang Hongsheng mourned, I still don't think it's enough. Big brother, fourth brother seems to have snapped up quite a lot. Zhou Kengsheng turned to Su Yeren, who glared at Yang Hongsheng and negotiated, Big brother, there are quite a few kids in my family. How about I give you two? Zhou Kengsheng rolled his eyes. I'll exchange it for Ghost Ward talismans. You two will each give a third of yours. I second that. I think you guys snapped most of them up. Dong Junming also didn't mind dabbling. Su Yeren and Yang Hongxing wept. They'd never seen such a trade coercion. But, who let him be the big brother? There was also fourth brother's blind meddling. Qi Shuyan spoke to them just about enough to know the culprit who had orchestrated this whole thing, before she got up and bade them goodbye. The four didn't insist on detaining her as they knew that she had to take the college entrance exam soon. The four waited until Qi Shuyan left before also deciding to go home. Brother. A feminine voice came, and Yang Chinchen ran over with a smile, greeting the other three eagerly, Brother Kengsheng, Brother Yeren, Brother Junming. Are you leaving? When Yang Hongxing saw Yang Chinchen, his smile dimmed a bit. Yes, we're leaving. Isn't it time for class? Aren't you going back to class yet? Seeing that her cousin was still cold and indifferent to her, Yang Chinchen was somewhat lost. This is a self-study period. It's fine as long as I finish my homework. Then, she turned to the other three. Brother Kengsheng, what are you guys doing here? Would you like me to show you around? No need. We're here to see a friend. Zhou Kengsheng lifted his wrist and spoke flatly. He looked at his watch and said to Yang Hongxing, second brother, you guys chat. We three will wait for you outside. Su Yeren and Dong Junming nodded towards Yang Chinchen and left together with Zhou Kengsheng. Yang Chinchen spaced out looking at the three departing backs, feeling a bit dejected, but she could understand. Her brother's three friends weren't easy to approach in the past either. After all, these three weren't ordinary people and from big households, so it was normal for them to be arrogant and aloof, but she had just seen them treating Qi Shuyan graciously as if they were good friends. Their friendship was way out, but when she got close, the three didn't even bother to pay her any attention. Brother, when are you free for dinner at my house? You haven't been to my house for a long time. Yang Chinchen adjusted her mood and acted cutely with Yang Hongxing. Chinchen, next time. I have to leave now. Yang Hongxing sighed. He didn't know how to get along with this cousin now. He used to be fond of her, but since she had offended that man, their family's business had been hit hard, and his parents had started warning him to stop associating with Yang Chinchen's family. Oh, well then, goodbye, brother. Yang Chinchen looked sadly at Yang Hongxing's back. The clear reproach in her cousin's eyes bewildered her. She had offended too many people, but she had no idea who exactly she had offended to become like this. Yang Chinchen sighed, turned around, and was about to leave when that profound and handsome face suddenly popped in her mind. An alarming thought suddenly struck her. Could it be him? Qi Shuyan carried her backpack, stuffed a large white rabbit candy into her mouth, and stood at the bus stop waiting for the bus. After waiting for a long time, she gradually fell into her own thoughts. She recalled her encounter with Feng Yanli today and the images, where Feng Yanli and Wu Wenyan's mother teamed up to plot against her, suddenly flashed in her mind. Zhou Kengsheng and the others' visit to the school later confirmed that the prediction in her mind was true. Qi Shuyan knitted her eyebrows, somewhat perplexed. Although she was a celestial master, she wasn't proficient at fortune-telling. She never really fancied studying it before, just because genuine fortune tellers mostly had the 5 disadvantages and 3 deficiencies repercussions. The so-called 5 disadvantages were nothing more than widower, widowed, loneliness, solitude, and disability. The 3 deficiencies, to put them plainly, were the lack of money, life and power. Because fortune-telling pried too much on heaven's will, it could easily result in divine punishment. Qi Shuyan had been forced to be a fortune-teller a few times before, but she knew her skills were passable. She could work out some generalizations and antecedents, in other terms, what was going to happen, but there was no way she could really predict the divine future. She wasn't sure if this change was considered a good or bad one, but it was a bit of a wake-up call. Living a new life, she was more in awe of the heavens than in her previous life. It seemed that she'd better reduce telling others fortunes later on. If she became disabled in any way, she wouldn't be able to cry even if she wanted to. "Hi, just got out of school." "What a coincidence." A manly voice suddenly interrupted Qi Shuyan's musings. Qi Shuyan unconsciously turned her head and saw a car parked beside her. The window rolled down, revealing a handsome face. Zhu Buqing took off his sunglasses, with a smile at the corner of his lips. "What are you staring at?" "The bus has left." Bedo Dem Qi Shuyan immediately turned her head to the left. Indeed, the bus had left while she was lost in her thoughts. "Get in, I'll take you back," Zhu Buqing offered. Qi Shuyan initially wanted to refuse, but looking at Zhu Buqing, a question suddenly crossed her mind. In her previous life, she had had many dealings with the Qi family in the capital, but she had never seen Zhu Buqing before. Judging from his familiarity with Qi Zhenbai, Zhu Buqing should have also been the son from an influential family. Could it be that he couldn't bear the blow of Qi Zhenbai's death and had gone abroad? Qi Shuyan hesitated and got in the car. Zhu Buqing thought he would have to spend some time persuading her. He didn't expect this girl to be unsuspecting, so he chuckled, saying, "Do you get in the car when someone asks you to? Aren't you afraid that I'll sell you? She's too obedient." Qi Shuyan smiled without replying. Zhu Buqing thought that Qi Shuyan was shy, so he warned her even more emphatically not to just get into someone else's car, that he was different. "How are you different?" "Of course, I'm different. I'm more than a gentleman." Zhu Buqing said mouthfully, "I'm not like those fancy schlocks out there. It's other people who have improper thoughts towards me." Qi Shuyan giggled. This man was so amusing. She was just about to speak when she suddenly saw a black mist flitting around Zhu Buqing's body. Her smile vanished in an instant. "Hey, what's wrong with you? You're staring stupidly." Zhu Buqing stopped at a traffic light intersection and noticed that something was off with Qi Shuyan's face. He was puzzled by her staring at him. Qi Shuyan shook her head and smiled. "Nothing." Zhu Buqing dropped Qi Shuyan off at the community. When she was about to get out of the car, Zhu Buqing suddenly grabbed her bag and said, "Hey, let's add each other on WeChat." Qi Shuyan stiffened abruptly. Her large, round, feline eyes widened and she turned to look at Zhu Buqing in horror, while a series of images flashed rapidly in her mind. "What's wrong with you?" Zhu Buqing looked at Qi Shuyan and quickly let go, thinking he had scared her. But did he look so scary? The moment he let go, the images on Qi Shuyan's mind were cut off. She looked down, got out of the car and watched Zhu Buqing drive away. Zhu Buqing was baffled. Something was strange about Qi Shuyan just now. Glancing from the rearview mirror, he saw that the round-eyed, little girl was still standing on the spot in a daze. Zhu Buqing's heart thumped erratically. He suddenly adjusted the mirror and examined his own handsome face. Could it be that I'm too handsome so the little girl is smitten? Zhu Buqing nodded decisively, definitely. Chapter 44. Mock Test. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Qi Shuyan stood stunned as she watched the car leave. All that filled her mind was that explosion that set the prairie ablaze and that scorching sea of fire. She saw him driving along and hitting a large truck around a bend, which could have been avoided by swiftly swerving. However, the steering wheel and brake failed, so he crashed headlong into that large truck, wrecking the car and killing him. As the curtain fell, she witnessed him stuck in the driver's seat, seriously injured, and looking desperate as he was gradually engulfed in the flames, until he and the car were burned to the ground. Qi Shuyan returned home, unable to get a grip of herself for a long time. It was unbelievable how that young man, who had been grinning vividly from ear to ear in front of her, would be buried in flames in the future. But that hazy, black mist hovering over him was indeed unmistakable. And in her past life, she had never seen Zhu Bucheng in the capital. If Zhu Bucheng had been close to the Qi family, it didn't make sense why she had never ever heard of him, except if he had left the country, or perhaps another possibility was that he had died. Qi Shuyan felt chilled at the bottom of her heart and cold sweat was dripping from her forehead. She felt panicked for no reason at all. He tugged her bag just now, which was a form of indirect contact. In other words, she could predict other people's fortunes by touching them, not just minor disasters or difficulties, but she could also foretell their life and death. Moreover, she could see crystal clear images of exactly what was going to happen. Qi Shuyan sucked in a breath. She wasn't proficient in physiognomy in her previous life and specialized in talismans and magic weapons. Her master didn't require her to be proficient in everything, so she'd only dabbled in fortune-telling and palm reading. Now with this change, she didn't know whether it was good or bad. In the evening, she casually cooked a bowl of noodles. She fried a golden, white, tender sunny-side-up egg, topped it on white noodles, and stir-fried another plate of green water spinach. Then, she sat comfortably in front of the computer and slowly slurped her noodles, while clicking into her store dashboard. By the time she saw the reviews of the shop on the dashboard, she almost spewed the noodles in her mouth right out with a mouthful of old blood. Of course, Su Yeren wouldn't give her a bad review, but the four of them were no better with their glowing reviews, clear and lengthy praises about how divine her products were. A few days after opening the store, thanks to the four of them, she leaped straight into being a crown seller. Wasn't this a clear-cut way of telling people that they were fake purchases? Anyway, as a normal person, seeing such sparse reviews and huge sales, she would never place an order. Qi Shuyan facepalmed. It's over, it's over. Why was it that she could foresee her shop closing down when she just opened it? Qi Shuyan restocked and closed the web page, drawing a lesson from the bitter experience. She'd better get on with her homework. Watching the store sales just made her feel pained in the ass. As soon as Qi Shuyan got back to school, many female students mobbed her fervently, questioning her all at once about the four people who came to see her yesterday. Even with the upcoming final mock test, it still couldn't hold back the fluttering hearts of these young girls as they dreamed of romance. Hey, class is about to start. The mock test results are coming out. This period is the class advisor's class, so don't get stuck here. Lin Xiaoting raised her voice and directly poured a big basin of cold water on these frenzied girls, drenching the thrill out of them. Thinking of the class advisor's scowl, all their jumbled thoughts were scared away. Qi Shuyan watched all the female students, who had just surrounded her, return to their seats in gloom, and gave Lin Xiaoting a thumbs up, quipping, "Young lady, you're awesome. Please accept my respects." Ugh, what's so great about me? It's our class advisor who's awesome. This period is his class, and he's about to issue our test papers. He should have ventilated with other teachers and he knows our grades in all subjects, so I hope you're still in the mood to laugh out loud later. Li Xiaoting held her small, round face, disconsolate. Qi Shuyan was puzzled. Are you afraid of testing badly? What do you think of our class advisor? He's great and asking him for leave is particularly easy. Qi Shuyan added, he's got a gentle personality. That's all just appearances. Have you forgotten that we also have a class teacher nicknamed, the Female Exterminator? With the English teacher, they were baptized, the Male and Female Exterminators. Class 5 has been at the bottom of the rankings several times this year, and every time we tested badly, we were fiercely scolded. Lin Xiaoting shivered at those memories. She flipped open her English book and started memorizing vocabulary. Qi Shuyan just wanted to put an end to her act and say, "What English words do you have to memorize before class?" when she heard a burst of English reading. Then, the tide became louder and louder, making Qi Shuyan feel like she was in the wrong class. Class 5 wasn't joking this time. Talk about the teacher unable to hit the brake when he arrived at class. This was the first time. It seemed like the teacher gave them a huge shadow, but Qi Shuyan, who came half-way through, was baffled. The class advisor was really gentle in her impression, so she really couldn't picture him in a thundering rage. Wang Yichuan came in with a taut face, holding a stack of graded papers. Every single student who spotted the class advisor coming in quivered and bowed down, almost burying their heads in their books. However, the furious storm that Class 5 had been expecting was slow in coming. Instead, they heard a gentle voice, with the teacher asking the English class representative to distribute the papers. His gentle voice scared Class 5 even more, their hearts thumping. Just how much had the class advisor been stimulated in the teacher's office that he'd have to grind such a blunt knife on their flesh to give them a heart attack? All of you performed pretty well this time, especially Qi Shuyan. Wang Yichuan's taut face finally betrayed a hint of a smile. She took second place for the whole year section and first in the class. Give her a round of applause, everyone. After Wang Yichuan's announcement, all the students of Class 5 were shell-shocked. They looked over in unison and lost their voices for quite a while. Soon, an audible pin-drop silence lapsed, followed by a stormy fervent round of applause. Many students looked up and saw teacher Wang Yichuan grinning from ear to ear. Wang Yichuan had never felt it was such a wise choice to accept this student who was kicked out of Class 1 into Class 5. He'd been indignant before that all the good ones went into Class 1, while all the garbage students were thrown into their parallel class. But now, he completely felt like he had picked up a treasure. The results of the mock test this time came out with several students of Class 5 making it into the top 100. What's more, there was a second place that appeared not in Class 1, but in their Class 5. In fact, when the marked test papers came out, all the senior year teachers were shocked at first. Qi Shuyan's mock test was all running full marks this time, except for a few similar subjects like chemistry and maths, which had more or less a few points deducted. Ningyan First Middle School had been grading exam papers with the names sealed all throughout, just to be fair. Back when he corrected this English test paper, he secretly marveled at how rich the students' basic skills and reading comprehension from the test paper were. He kept thinking that the student was from Class 1, so the more he corrected, the angrier and more jealous he became. Why should Wen Mingzhu take over all these good students? Qi Shuyan was about to say something modest, but the phone in her pocket vibrated gently. She had to pull it out first and tap the message, but since it was just a strange phone number and a text message inviting her to a meal, she didn't even bother to send a rejection message. She just wanted to stuff her phone back into her pocket when her phone rang again shortly afterwards and she saw a message saying, "Little Sister Qi, I'm Bucheng, young Master Qi Zhenbai's best friend. We've just met, remember? Are you free tomorrow at noon? Let's have lunch together. I had some bad luck today. If you really say you don't remember, I won't be mad at you, just sad. Sister, you really don't know how unlucky I was today. I almost died in a car crash. Have some compassion and come out tomorrow at noon. Maybe you won't get a chance to see me anymore." The tone was distinctly light-hearted and teasing. Qi Shuyan couldn't take her eyes off the words, "I almost died in a car crash," for a long time, and her face gradually sank heavily. She was about to decline, but by the time she reacted, her reply accepting the invite was already sent out. Chapter 45. Unlucky Zhu Bucheng. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Shuyan, what have you been staring at and thinking about? Aren't you going home yet? In the evening after school, Li Xiaoting reached out and waved her hand in front of Qi Shuyan with a smile on her face. Right, you should take a look at the forum. It's enough of a face-slapping, right? The corpse of that person who posted explosive allegations about you before has been dug up and flogged again. What a degradation. Our Shuyan has the face and the looks, and is an invisible top student. Exactly. In the future, when any cat or dog comes over to confess, they should pee and take a look at their own virtue. Zheng Shujun also raised her brows and taunted Lu Qinfeng. When Zheng Shujun said this, the entire class looked at Lu Qinfeng in unison, whose face was bluish-white and quite unsightly, with his head almost buried in his book. Many students also unconsciously stayed away from him, as if they would be contaminated with germs once they were near him. Qi Shuyan watched the two sisters, Zheng Shujun and Li Xiaoting, speak for her, and her iron heart felt snugly warm. When she was under fire before, these two sisters were the only ones who spoke for her. But she was still puzzled and looked at Zheng Shujun. Confession. What confession? Zheng Shujun was stunned. When she regained consciousness, she realized what Qi Shuyan meant. Shuyan had even forgotten that Lu Qinfeng blocked her and confessed his feelings before. She almost burst out laughing for a second, but she stifled her laughter. Nothing important, I was just kidding. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Shujun is just warning certain people not to crave for someone they're not worthy of. Li Xiaoting hammered the table and laughed. When Lu Qinfeng heard this, he clenched his fists tightly and his face turned livid, while the students beside him admired his face as if watching a joke. Hey, Shuyan, someone revealed on the forum again that the group of people who cursed you out last time had been hired. Zhao Hongba from senior class 7 was the one who slandered you on the forum before. Wang Wanting suddenly laughed. They've finally shot themselves in the foot this time. Zhao Hongba has been advised to leave the school and the others involved were also given major demerits by the school. Wang Wanting's voice attracted everyone, so they all swiped the school forum again, and the more they looked, the more indignant they became. This man is too despicable. That's right, how could a man be so petty as to hire others to curse people? This man is so strange. He's a psycho. Xu Yan has no grudge against him. Why on earth is he slandering others? Yeah, I'd understand a little if he were a girl. It must have been a failed confession and a grudge. Everyone whispered into each other's ears in a heated discussion. The more they talked, the more they believed that this man failed confessing, and so discredited the woman. Listening to the discussion, Wang Wanting walked to Qi Shuyan with some embarrassment on her face and apologized. Shuyan, I knew you weren't such a person. I was merely under too much pressure to have said something hurtful like that. I felt so guilty when I got home. I hope you don't take my words to heart. Qi Shuyan looked at Wang Wanting and shook her head, smiling faintly. It's fine, I can understand. That's great, then I'm relieved. Wang Wanting stuck her tongue out and smiled brightly. Shuyan, you did really well on this test. Do you have some tricks? Qi Shuyan opened her round, feline eyes and smiled ambiguously. It's probably diligence. What other tricks can I have? Well, I have something else to do, I'll go first. Kiangsuju was a century-old shop, the so called fragrant wine feared no dark alley. Although this shop wasn't the most luxurious in its remote location, it was a very famous century-old shop in Fuzhou. Manager Fang and this young Master Zhu in front of him were old acquaintances. He knew that this young Master Zhu would definitely come here whenever he came to Fuzhou. This time, he had not only come, but also brought someone with him. Manager Fang immediately welcomed them cordially. Young Master Zhu, we have already reserved a private room for you. Manager Fang was considered quite experienced and knowledgeable, and entertaining the so called big shots wasn't at all uncommon. The two behind looked like bodyguards, but the one beside young Master Zhu was like an outstanding man in a common crowd. He'd never seen such a man so noble and so elegant, who could make one panic-stricken for no reason with just a flippant glance. Not knowing what sort of big shot he was, Manager Fang was even more respectful. Junbai, the dishes in this restaurant taste really good. You definitely won't regret coming here later. Zhu Buqing smiled. Qi Junbai's cold, star-like slender eyes looked at him askance without speaking and beckoned him to lead the way. Seeing Qi Junbai like this, Zhu Buqing took the lead and strode forward without Manager Fang's assistance, complaining with his hands in his pockets, Junbai, you don't know how unlucky I've been lately. A few days ago, a flower pot almost hit me. The day before yesterday, I almost stepped on an empty sewer manhole cover. Yesterday, I encountered a series of tailgating collisions. Fortunately, my driving skills are excellent. Unlike those people, I didn't knock my. Before he could finish saying the word head. The heavy, intricate, and superfluous chandelier hanging above Zhu Buqing's head suddenly flickered. As he lifted his left foot and was about to step upstairs, the large flickering chandelier on the ceiling suddenly fell down without warning. Zhu Buqing froze for a moment, and before he could regain his senses, Qi Zhenbai responded swiftly, grabbing his arm and yanking him hard backward. Zhu Buqing was yanked into a stumble, but before he could stand firm, the heavy superfluous chandelier on the ceiling crashed heavily to the floor right after, shattering into pieces, while bright sparks flashed overhead. F***ck, it would have blown my brains out if it hit me. I'd have been electrically burned too. Zhu Buqing's heart chilled and a trace of lingering fear flashed on his bright, handsome face. He knitted his brows and rebuked angrily, "Manager Fong, your facilities here are too unreliable. How dare you hang it on when it's already this old?" Manager Fong was shocked by the thrill, wiping his sweat in panic and incredulity. This, our Kiangseju facilities are regularly inspected. How could this happen? Noticing Zhu Buqing's grim face, he immediately apologized in a fluster, "Young Master Zhu, it's all because we haven't done our regular inspection properly. I'll have it taken care of right away and be sure to give you an explanation later. Just let me show you to your private room first, so as not to spoil the aesthetic mood of your meal." Zhu Buqing was ghastly pale, not really knowing how he could still encounter this kind of misfortune when just having a meal, but he could only do so for now. Manager Fong apologized and led Zhu Buqing and Qi Zhenbai into the private room. "Zhenbai, fortunately you reacted quickly just now, otherwise, would have been killed." After Zhu Buqing sat down, he passed a grateful look at Qi Zhenbai beside him and complained gloomily once more, "Why have I been so unlucky lately? Did I displease some god? Should I go to worship at a temple? Young Master Zhu, would you like to order now, or wait until everyone is here?" Manager Fong inquired apprehensively. Zhu Buqing waved his hand. "We'll order later when everyone is here." "Okay." Manager Fong ensured that the two didn't need his service, and was about to exit the room smiling, when a waitress ushered a girl in on her hind legs. Manager Fong didn't have the time to speak when Zhu Buqing saw Qi Shuyan with a sharp eye and immediately became excited. "Oh, sister, you came just in time," he said and unconsciously went up to welcome her. But before taking a few steps, he tripped over his foot again. Zhu Buqing almost cursed out loud in anger. Qi Shuyan advanced forward swiftly to help him up. Her face became more and more heavy as she stared deeply at Zhu Buqing's deeply blackened forehead. The black mist on Zhu Buqing's forehead was too terrifying at this moment. His forehead was almost completely shrouded in black mist, as if it would erupt at any time. Almost in sync, the horrific image of a car crashing off an overpass and wrecking it flashed through her mind. Cold sweat seeped out of Qi Shuyan's palms as she averted her eyes. "Are you all right?" Chapter 46. Zhu Buqing's Perils. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhu Buqing stood firm and tall, with traces of embarrassment flashing across his bright handsome face. "What can I do? It's just bad luck." "Right, let me introduce you to a friend. You've met a few times before, but just haven't been formally introduced," Zhu Buqing said as he shot his best friend on the side a wink. Unfortunately, this friend spoke too little and was as indifferent as before, so he had to speak up himself. "This is my best friend Zhenbai. Do you remember, Sister Qi?" While Zhu Buqing was doing the introduction, Qi Zhenbai glanced over with an indifferent look and a bit of astonishment flickered across his handsome face. His face quickly restored its coldness, and he nodded indifferently as a greeting. Qi Shuyan nodded gently. "I remember." Even she wouldn't believe it if she said she didn't remember such a huge tonic pill. She sneaked a glance at someone whose existence was like a flashing several hundred-watt light bulb, and her eyes wished they could always stick to him. But reminded of something, she gritted her teeth and was just about to immediately avert her eyes, when it so happened that a pair of sharp, deep cold eyes shot straight at her. The two faced each other at once. Qi Shuyan held her breath and calmly shifted her gaze back to Zhu Bucheng with difficulty. Last time, he must have thought she was trying to seduce him. If she did something ambiguous again, she wouldn't be able to wash it off, even if she plunged into the Yellow River. No matter how tasty this huge tonic pill was, he wasn't hers. It was really a pity. Why wasn't this perfect huge tonic pill hers? Zhu Bucheng liked this girl's frank and unabashed temper. If it were someone else, she'd have been already overwhelmed by flattery and honor and smitten with Zhenbai long ago. Of course, he also admitted that he was one of those types whoever he found pleasing to the eye, he would be satisfied no matter where he looked at them. Otherwise, no matter how good they were, they might not have necessarily caught his attention. He was also quite happy to introduce this girl to Zhenbai. Now that this girl didn't know Zhenbai's identity, if she had some problems in the future and he wasn't there, Zhenbai might be able to help out, right? Besides, Zhenbai was much more powerful than him. Qi Shuyan really had no idea about Zhu Bucheng's profound meaning. If she had known at this moment, she really didn't know whether to thank him for his concern or cry. Seeing that his friend still showed no due respect for his feelings and had not said a word, Zhu Bucheng was a bit anxious, so he leaned close and whispered in Qi Zhenbai's ear, "Zhenbai, give me some face and say a few words. How embarrassed would I be otherwise?" Qi Zhenbai glanced faintly at his overzealous friend in front of him and suspected whether this girl had poured some kind of magic potion into this guy, Zhu Bucheng. With this thought in mind, his thin lips spat out the two words, "Qi Zhenbai," in a clear and concise manner, choking the red-faced Zhu Bucheng, which made the atmosphere awkward. Qi Shuyan also had nothing to say. After that, her eyes never left Zhu Bucheng. Qi Zhenbai frowned. Just then Manager Fong, looking apologetic, came in again, breaking the awkwardness of the silent atmosphere. "Young Master Zhu, I'm really sorry. I just went to verify that the chandelier that crashed down today wasn't old. It was just replaced with a new one 2 days ago. We've also had our shop checked a couple of times in the last day or two, and it was fine before we let the installer go. We don't know why the chandelier suddenly fell down today. I'm truly sorry." Manager Fong wasn't really going to shirk responsibility. He was telling the truth. By all accounts, they couldn't have had this happen in their century. Old shop, and they had it inspected by a reliable installer several times. If it was an old chandelier that fell down, it would have been reasonable, but it was the newly installed chandelier. Manager Fong felt skeptical of life. Zhu Bucheng frowned. Knowing that he wouldn't be able to eat this meal if he fussed about it, he immediately waved his hand for Manager Fong to go down immediately and serve some snacks and drinks first. "Yes, young Master Zhu." Qi Zhenbai had always been keen and somehow suddenly thought of Zhu Bucheng's misfortunes these days. His brows knitted and never eased. He could consider conspiracy theories in other matters, but he couldn't make sense of today. He didn't think the Zhu family's hands would dare to stretch out in front of him. Could it only be that this kid, Zhu Bucheng, was too unlucky? Qi Shuyan sat down, her eyes deepened a bit, and asked Zhu Bucheng inadvertently, "What happened to the chandelier earlier?" "It's nothing. I was so unlucky just now and almost got hit by a chandelier." At this moment, Zhu Bucheng was also a little depressed. What Manager Fong had just said reminded him that he'd been getting more and more unlucky every day for the past few days. Having brushed past death several times, he was getting cold feet. He was a staunch materialist, but at this moment, he couldn't help but say to Qi Zhenbai, "Zhenbai, I've had bad luck repeatedly in the past few days. Should I go worship at the temple some other day or ask an expert to change my bad luck? Not to mention how many times I was unlucky recently, I'm also chilled to the bone just thinking about that chandelier smashing down. Having said so much, Zhu Bucheng reverted to his usual playful tone and didn't take it too seriously. Forget it, let's eat first. Maybe, I'll have better luck later on. Sister Shuyan, feel free to order whatever you want to eat today. Qi Shuyan stared at Zhu Bucheng wordlessly. Not to mention that Qi Shuyan was very fond of Zhu Bucheng, even if a person died in front of her for no reason, she couldn't remain indifferent. It was terrifying looking at the black mist growing thicker on Zhu Bucheng's forehead and glinting ominously from time to time. It was reasonable to say that Zhu Bucheng's original fortune was extremely good, red and white, with a few wisps of purple aura. Naturally, the fate of a man like him wouldn't be worse. But now, he was dusty with a blackened glabella, and a dense black mist lingering all over him. The 12 zodiac signs were all in turmoil, which was a sign that everything wasn't going well and bad luck was overshadowing everything. He must have touched something that shouldn't have been touched during this time, or moved something that shouldn't have been moved. She was afraid that that person didn't just want to bring Zhu Bucheng bad luck, but actually wanted him to die. Qi Zhenbai saw that the girl in front of him hadn't taken her eyes off Zhu Bucheng since she entered the door, and squinted his long, narrow slender eyes. There was no joy or anger on his face, but it took one's breath away and made one afraid to take a breath. Noticing that not only was the girl in front of him staring at him, but also his best friend beside him, Zhu Bucheng quickly quipped, "Sister Qi, you keep staring at me. Do you have a crush on me?" He paused, then said smugly to Qi Zhenbai, "Zhenbai, this is the first time a girl has ever looked at me in your presence without looking at you." However, Qi Shuyan wasn't in the mood to kid around. Regardless of whether he believed her or not, she suddenly said to Zhu Bucheng, "You'd really better find an expert to change your bad luck. I think you'll have a lot of bad luck in the next couple of days, so it's best not to go out, especially today. Don't go out, or else you'll be seriously injured or killed. I happen to have a safety talisman here, 100,000 apiece. I'll give you a 30% discount, 30,000 apiece." As soon as her words fell, Zhu Bucheng first spurted out laughing so hard he was convulsing. "Talented, really talented. You're so good, Sister Qi, even better at this than me. I barely convinced you today. Bring this safety talisman with you for now. If I need anything in the future, I'll be sure to call you first." Chapter 47. Zhu Bucheng is in danger. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Seeing that he didn't take her words seriously, Qi Shuyan frowned and really wanted to say something like, "Brother, you're going to die, so don't wait until you need it. If you really wait until next time, I'll be visiting your graveyard by then." Qi Shuyan turned his head to look at Qi Zhenbai next to him and so happened to meet his sharp indiscernible scrutiny and measurement. He was wearing a trim, ironed, snow-white shirt and suit pants, with both snow-white sleeves rolled up revealing strong fair arms, and his dark ink hair was meticulously taken care of. He raised a brow and snorted softly, "Your family wouldn't be fortune tellers and selling talismans, right?" Qi Shuyan inexplicably palpitated at his strange, intrusive gaze. Subconsciously, she couldn't bear to look away, but when she regained her senses, she reacted immediately. Well, that look in his eyes was treating her as a charlatan again. "Do I look much like a swindler?" Qi Shuyan stared back with her large, round feline eyes, unwilling to be outdone. "Of course not." She shifted the topic. "Naturally, a sacred profession like fortune-telling is for highly qualified people with genuine talent. There's just too many people passing off fish eyes as pearls and ruining the reputation of this business. It's a pity there are too many foolish and ill-informed mortals. This is probably the loneliness of a master." Qi Shuyan shook her head and sighed. Reminded of her own taobao shop that was without any buyers, she suddenly felt a moment of melancholy. There were too few people who could tell good from bad and too many glib-tongued cheats who pretended to be experts. Qi Shuyan's deadpan nonsense made Zhu Bucheng pound the table and his chest hurt from laughing. Yes, yes, Sister Shuyan, theirs are all fish eyes and yours are all pearls. Oh. Do you mean you are such a genuine master? Qi Zhenbai kept staring at her, his eyes like electricity, his expression cold and strange. What was wrong with this little girl? Of all things, she chose to swindle others and chose to deceive them of all people. Be no calm, although, I'm trying to be modest, this is indeed the case. Qi Shuyan replied. Qi Zhenbai was amused at this little girl's cheekiness. It was a pity that whether he was laughing or not, he had a deterrent pressure and a reserved smile. So, can you tell my fortune? Qi Shuyan wasn't afraid in the least, knowing that he was clearly trying to test her. She didn't dare use such rhetorics before, but her fortune-telling now was different from the past, so she said, 500 for a divination. What would you like me to foretell? Qi Zhenbai didn't hesitate to pull out a wad of cash from his wallet and tapped it on the table. Whatever you like. Qi Shuyan took out a blank piece of paper and a pen from her bag and put it on the table. Write a word and I'll help you foretell your marriage destiny. Qi Zhenbai glanced at her wordlessly, picked up the pen, turned his wrist, and wrote the word, "Bai," on the white paper. Qi Shuyan took a closer look. It was exquisite calligraphy, with iron strokes and silver hooks. The font sharpness was exactly the same as his temperament. The Bai character is a wonderful character that means eternal youth, and also implies longevity. Your fate is very good. Even if it was good, he didn't escape an untimely death in his past life, so it was fair to say that causal reincarnation in this world was fair. Qi Shuyan didn't dwell much on it and began to calculate his marriage destiny. Qi Shuyan's brows suddenly furrowed as she stared at the character. A few minutes passed in the blink of an eye and beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. She looked more closely at the word "Bai" carefully, and yet couldn't make out anything. Her face changed dramatically and her eyes were filled with incredulity. She refused to believe in this fallacy and continued to calculate, but to her surprise, no matter how she calculated, it was all blank. Qi Zhenbai looked at Qi Shuyan with her head down and beads of sweat seeping at the tip of her nose. Her calmness just now had changed as she stared at the word on the white paper anxiously, as if there was a way she could see a flower out of that word, "Bai." A scornful arc rose from the corner of his mouth. Up until now, this little girl was still as stubborn as a mule. Qi Shuyan looked up and of course noticed the odd smile on Qi Zhenbai's lips. She took a deep breath, somewhat freaked out. She still hadn't figured out anything after a long time and wasn't at all sure what the problem was. Was it because his fate was special? What was so special that she couldn't figure it out? Did you figure it out? Qi Zhenbai's lips curled up unhurriedly, his smile growing deeper. No. Qi Shuyan lowered her eyes and bit her lip. There was no need for her to look at his face. She knew very well that at this point, she was really taken as either a charlatan or a newly debunked charlatan. She was extremely unreconciled, but unfortunately she really couldn't calculate his fortune, so she immediately pushed back the cash in front of her in dejection. Zhu Buchen was a little embarrassed at the atmosphere, complaining about his friend being so serious. Why did he have to put the girl on the spot? This little sister Shuyan is so young. She might have also been tricked into worshipping some kind of charlatan master. Zhu Buchen was more sympathetic and immediately eased her embarrassment. Sister Shuyan, forget it if you can't figure it out. It's just for fun, isn't it? The food is almost ready to be served. Qi Zhenbai, himself, wasn't a man who would ever bicker with a woman, and his thoughts were similar to Zhu Buchen's, thinking that this girl might have also been cheated at a young age, but he'd never been much of a talker. This time, he glanced woodenly at the bills on the table, but reprimanded somewhat sternly, "Little girl, a master would never claim to be a master. You'd better behave honestly, lessen your curiosity, study harder, and believe in science." Hearing his last quip, "believe in science," Qi Shuyan almost broke her molars out of anger. Her eyes suddenly lit up and reached out to grab Qi Zhenbai's arm, but he swiftly moved his hand away. His pair of narrow eyes flashed warily, looking at Qi Shuyan as if she were a lecher. "Little girl, please conduct yourself with dignity," Qi Zhenbai said stonily. Zhu Bucheng, who was on the side, couldn't help but argue for Qi Shuyan and spat out, "Zhenbai, she's a girl, can't you be a little more gentle with your tone?" "No." Qi Zhenbai answered faintly. Qi Shuyan and Zhu Bucheng choked at the same time. Qi Shuyan was even more furious. How could there be such a narcissistic man who didn't know how to treat women with tenderness? If she didn't have a few vestiges of sanity left, she'd have gotten up and left. Qi Shuyan was reluctant to admit defeat, so she gritted her teeth and said, "I couldn't figure it out this time and I'm not learned in the art, so I admit defeat. I just hope that next time, when I am more refined in my art, young Master Qi will give me another chance." Qi Zhenbai couldn't help but purse his lips after seeing that the little girl in front of him hadn't recognized the facts and was still immersed in superstition. Seeing that Qi Shuyan was now like a defeated, little fox with drooping ears and a head hanging low, Zhu Bucheng hurriedly agreed on Qi Zhenbai's behalf, "Sure, you have it, sister. If Zhenbai won't let you calculate next time, I'll let you do it." This got off at the wrong foot. Let's keep up the good work next time. By the way, Sister Shuyan, don't you girls enjoy tarot cards and such? Tell us about it. When the food was served, Qi Shuyan ate her food without looking up, clearly depressed by her fortune-telling moments ago. Seeing her so dejected, Qi Zhenbai reflected on whether he'd spoken too harshly. After further reflection, he said, "Shall I buy one?" When Qi Shuyan heard him, she felt even more depressed. Resisting the desire to hit someone, she looked up at him and said chokingly, "Forget it." Qi Zhenbai was somewhat puzzled and amused seeing her panting with rage. She had obviously exposed herself, yet she was the one who felt wronged instead. After they finished their meal, Zhu Bucheng wanted to give Qi Shuyan a ride, but she shook her head and refused. "It's okay. It's not on the way. It's still early and pretty close to the school, just a few bus rides away." "So be it." It just so happened that Zhenbai still had some things to do, so he had to send him away first. Zhu Bucheng said regretfully, "Shuyan, I'll treat you to a meal again next time, just the two of us, no one else." Qi Shuyan's gaze suddenly fell on the Fuzhou number 87 road sign nearby, and almost as soon as she saw it, she fell into a trance. She suddenly touched Zhu Bucheng's arm again, only to see a car driving away, and driving back shortly thereafter. On the way back, the same car as before collided with a truck and suddenly swerved straight into the bridge, bursting into flames. The gruesome picture of a man being burned alive immediately flashed in her mind with increasing clarity, clearer than what she had seen a couple of times before. She had only seen the silhouette of the man in the fire before resembling Zhu Bucheng very much, but now, the face of the burning man in the car conflagration crying for help was undoubtedly Zhu Bucheng. The road sign where his car crashed was also the Fuzhou No. 87 road sign. Qi Shuyan's pupils constricted and her face went white. Chapter 48. Car Accident. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What else do you want, Sister Shuyan? Zhu Bucheng was shocked when she touched his arm. Qi Shuyan shook her head and let go of his hand, but her black and white eyes were firmly locked on Zhu Bucheng as she commanded, "Drive carefully on the road." Although Zhu Bucheng found Qi Shuyan's attitude a bit strange, it still felt nice to be cared for by a cute, little girl. His face was instantly wreathed in smiles and he rubbed Qi Shuyan's head. "You too, be careful on the way. We're leaving. I'll take you for a ride next time." Zhu Bucheng and Qi Zhenbai had just gotten in the car when a figure standing outside the window knocked. Zhu Bucheng rolled down the window and looked at Qi Shuyan outside in surprise. Qi Zhenbai, who was in the back seat, also looked at Qi Shuyan in surprise, his majestic slender eyes probing and scrutinizing her rather intimidatingly. Qi Shuyan averted her gaze after a glance at him, having no time now to ponder over the deep meaning behind his gaze. Her moist, deep and quiet eyes wandered around the hazy, black mist that was rolling around Zhu Buqing a few times and spoke to him solemnly. There has to be a reason for any abnormalities, so I don't think your recent bad luck is just a coincidence. Even though you don't believe me, I still hope you will wear this talisman well later on, and pay me afterwards. Qi Shuyan stubbornly handed over the inconspicuous, yellow talisman in her hand. Zhu Buqing was stumped, somewhat astonished at the talisman that Qi Shuyan was holding up and looked embarrassed about receiving it. Zhu Buqing was about to refuse, but when he saw Qi Shuyan's unusually sincere eyes, his heart softened. He took it and smiled helplessly. Okay, thanks for your safety talisman. When Qi Shuyan saw him taking it but not putting it on, her jet-black, dark eyes focused on him and her little, fan-like eyelashes blinked, pretty and innocent. The corner of Zhu Buqing's mouth twitched. This girl looks soft and adorable, but is in fact stubborn. As expected, girls are quite troublesome. He grumbled inside, but couldn't resist Qi Shuyan's watery eyes. He was forced to wear this rustic talisman around his neck, and noticing a pair of eyes in the back seat, his cheeks heated up. Feeling ashamed of himself, he coughed twice. We really have to go, Sister Qi. See you next time. Qi Shuyan curled her lips in a dazzling smile and took a few steps back. Goodbye. Sitting in the back, Qi Zhenbai took in this scene. His cold and profound look formed a contrast with his slender eyes as he fell into thought. Has this girl shifted her attention to Zhu Buqing since he ignored her? This girl looks quite young, but she's got a lot of thoughts. Zhenbai, perfected Zhang, seems to have left, but even he is helpless to do anything about the condition of Elder Lin's grandson. It looks like this is going to be a little tricky. Elder Lin hasn't found that talisman master yet, right? Elder Lin's grandson's condition seems to have started flaring up recently again. Zhu Buqing sighed. Elder Lin's daughter and son-in-law are getting divorced too. The Lin family has been troubled lately. Zhenbai, do you think there are really gods and spirits in this world? Qi Zhenbai leaned on the back of the seat with his eyes closed, his long eyelashes covering his eyes and face, and said faintly, believe it or not, weren't you a firm materialist before? Zhu Buqing smiled and said, I'm still a firm believer in materialism. Seeing is believing, and I've never really seen the truth talisman that Yuanlin mentioned before. Yuanlin is a good cop, but he's becoming mentally ill. Didn't there used to be a story about a will.o.the.wisp at night, and later it was found out to be man.made. So just because a lot of things can't be explained by science doesn't mean they can be attributed to supernatural beings. In the final analysis, our scientific research hasn't reached that height yet. Zhu Buqing didn't care when he saw that Qi Zhenbai ignored him. Qi Zhenbai had always been cold in nature. After saying a lengthy paragraph, it was already good enough to get a line or two back from him. He glanced at the talisman on the passenger seat and was abruptly reminded of something. A huge smile blossomed on his handsome face. Haha, Zhenbai, have you noticed? This time, that little girl has been staring at me at the dining table, and now, she also gave me a talisman. Did she fall for me? In the past, whenever we were together, all those women stared at you. This girl really has good eyes, discerning eyes. He was now getting fonder of her. Qi Zhenbai felt a headache listening to Zhu Buqing's constant chatter. He rubbed his brows and suddenly opened his sharp slender eyes. His face darkened and in a cold voice, said, shut up. As soon as Qi Zhenbai's icy voice rang, the car instantly quieted down. Zhu Buqing closed his mouth resentfully, not daring to speak out in anger, but roasted inwardly. Best friend is good at everything, just reticent, cold and dictatorial. It's no wonder his employees privately call him a tyrant. Zhu Buqing shuddered when he remembered that his father still wanted to send him to study at Qi Zhenbai's company. He could be one of Zhenbai's few good friends, naturally because of his childhood relationship with him. Add to that a skin thick enough, but it wasn't easy to survive under his extreme pressure all day long. He felt that a chatterbox like him could lose a few years of life if he spoke less. Zhu Bucheng sent Qi Zhenbai to his office, then drove the car around to go back. While waiting in boredom at a stop-light on number 87 road, he pulled out the yellow talisman around his neck. Zhu Bucheng pulled off the yellow talisman and turned it around in his hand. He looked left and right, but couldn't see anything special except for the lousy paper. It had the ghostly magic arrays drawn on it, which were quite intricate. Thinking of the girl, who was dying to slip it to him, he shook his head helplessly. A rotten paper with ghostly magic arrays like this is even sold for tens of thousands. Crooks nowadays are really becoming more and more skilled. He didn't know what kind of magic potion they poured on that girl, but he wasn't as easily fooled as her. If he ever saw the charlatan, who swindled her, he would have to beat that guy black and blue to keep him in the hospital for a few months. With this in mind, he was about to throw it out the window, when a gust of wind whipped through the car window and the talisman at his fingertips was blown into the passenger seat. Zhu Bucheng was about to pick it up and throw it sideways, but seeing the red light right up ahead, he didn't care about the talisman anymore. With endless traffic on the overpass, a single moment of carelessness could still result in a rear-end collision like the last time, so Zhu Bucheng was a little more cautious and didn't rush forward as rashly as last time. Just as he was about to turn left at the intersection, a huge truck suddenly came roaring out of nowhere. Frightened, he immediately swerved the steering wheel to the right, and just as he narrowly avoided this truck and drove to the right side of the overpass, he slammed on the brakes. However, before he could breathe a sigh of relief, avoiding this thrilling scene, he soon discovered that the car's brakes weren't working. His face turned deathly pale and his eyes widened in horror. Unfortunately, no matter how he stepped on it, the car galloped off like a mad horse that listened to no command. Zhu Bucheng toppled uncontrollably in the passenger seat, looking extremely terrified. Before losing all his senses, he somehow suddenly thought of what the girl had said before, but it was too late for regrets. With a bang, the car leaped off the overpass, flipped, and crashed heavily into the middle of number 87 road under the overpass, turning into a pile of scrap metal. It scared the hell out of the people near number 87 road. They didn't know what was going on, but a car suddenly fell off the overpass. What the hell is going on? It looks like a car accident. Someone is still inside. What are we going to do? Call an ambulance. People gathered near number 87 road, looking at the car that fell from the overpass. While the people in the crowd were talking to one another, the car that had flipped over suddenly exploded, combusting rapidly. The heat wave frightened countless passers-by into taking steps backwards in horror, not daring to go near the raging flames at all. Someone seems to be in there. That's terrible. Call the police quickly. Chapter 49. Shocking. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Soon, a police car and ambulance arrived at number 87 Fuzhou Road in succession. The group of firefighters sighed in unanimous silence as they saw the scene. There was no need for them to extinguish the fire. The raging flames have burned out, revealing the blackened frame of a pile of burned scrap car metal. Even the hard car had been burned into an empty frame, so what more could be said about the human flesh? It must have been burned to death long ago, with only skeletal remains. The fire captain ordered his subordinates to circle the crime scene and sent a few more to collect evidence from several witnesses. After giving instructions, he was about to call the criminal police to notify the relevant department to come and investigate. In the car. The person in the car seems alive. A fireman approached the burned-out shell of the car and his eyes rounded in astonishment, his voice trembling. Holy smoke, how is this possible? When several firefighters came together to drag the unscathed, handsome young man out of the car. The shocked eyes of the people in the crowd nearby, who had watched the accident from start to finish, almost popped out as if they were seeing a ghost. They had watched the car explode by itself and burn to the ground, yet the man was in perfect condition and hadn't been killed. This was simply a miracle. Too unbelievable. But they were unsure whether Zhu Bucheng was dead or alive as the paramedics carried him unconscious into the ambulance. Several paramedics swiftly carried Zhu Bucheng into the ambulance, and the doctor and nurses, who were planning to roll up their sleeves to save the man and administer first aid measures, exchanged looks with each other after examining Zhu Bucheng's condition. They each looked incredulous as if they'd seen a ghost. When they lifted the man on the stretcher, they all thought that the young man was in a critical condition. After all, the car was burned like that. Even if he hadn't been burned to ashes, they were afraid that he would have choked to death from the smoke. However, to their amazement, they saw that the young man, who was at death's door, was not only alive and well, but totally unharmed. They heard from the crowd at the scene that his car had fallen down from the high overpass. Even if he wasn't burned to death, he should have at least had a concussion. Miracle, it's really a miracle. The dubious doctor, who examined the young man on the stretcher again, yelled and slapped his thigh fiercely with his mouth wide open when he found out that he had only minor injuries. This man is really lucky. I just saw how high the overpass was. A nurse was shocked. It wouldn't be rare to suffer from a concussion after a fall. Yeah, it's weird that the car was burned to an empty frame, like a piece of scrap metal, and he isn't even hurt at all. You don't say. Not only did the car explode when it fell, it was also so high, but he was only slightly injured. This man's ancestors must have burned high incense. Hey, what's in his hand? While the group of paramedics were discussing animatedly in wonder, Zhu Bucheng, in a daze, gradually sobered up. Those terrifying images flashed through his mind in a jumble, and when he saw people, he thought he was dead. Zhu Bucheng was already sober and stared in confusion at the group of white-clad paramedics in front of him. He was dumbstruck for a spell, but immediately realized that he was out of danger, and was carried into the ambulance. Are you all right? I bet I'm not dead. Zhu Bucheng's voice shook. He remembered that his car's brake didn't work, and he drove off the overpass extremely terrified. He was still somewhat conscious when he crashed heavily into the road under the overpass. He tried to crawl out of the car immediately, but before he could free himself from the shackles, the car exploded suddenly and flames sprang up everywhere. Before he passed out, he thought he was going to die. Zhu Bucheng was filled with incredulity. When he raised his hand to pat his forehead, he suddenly felt something strange. He looked down and saw the yellow talisman tightly clenched in his hand. The yellow talisman, however, had already turned black and was no longer as dazzlingly bright as before. As he opened his hand, the blackened yellow talisman suddenly turned into ashes and scattered from his fingertips. Meanwhile, the paramedic beside him noticed that he had awakened and said in surprise, "Yeah, little brother, you aren't dead. You're alive and well. You're so lucky to be alive. You don't know how scary the accident you had today was. Your car was burned down to the frames. It's unbelievable that you're all right." The paramedics next to him also echoed. Some were even curious that he'd woken up so quickly after experiencing such a tragic car accident. They were staring at him like they were looking at a ghost. Zhu Bucheng was agape, stunned in place and unable to say a single word. What did they mean? His car was burned to its frames and he wasn't burned to death. Zhu Bucheng suddenly and inexplicably thought of the talisman which had turned black just now. Was it really the protective talisman that saved him? Zhu Bucheng was stumped. All of a sudden, he thought of the little girl's prophecy and the way she gave him the protective talisman. Besides the talisman, he couldn't think of any other possibility. At the thought that it was this talisman that protected him from being burned to death, Zhu Bucheng was so horrified that he swallowed his saliva and almost choked. His eyes were full of horror, shock, and disbelief. Thinking of how Sister Shuyan got him out of the jaws of danger with just this talisman and foretold his misfortune, she was simply a godly person. If Sister Shuyan hadn't given him this talisman, he could have died tonight. Recalling the car crash before his death, he still has palpitations and a cold sweat. He was weak all over and dreadfully pale with cold sweat trickling down his forehead. He felt that the most fortunate thing in his life was meeting Sister Shuyan. Zhu Buqing was excited and moved. He also remembered clearly how he and Qi Zhenbai didn't believe Shuyan's words and treated her as a swindler. Zhu Buqing's hand trembled, moved with guilt. Almost immediately, he wanted to call Shuyan to express his gratitude. He fumbled for his phone on his body, but couldn't find it. He supposed that it must have fallen off during the car crash earlier, so he had to borrow one from a paramedic beside him. The paramedic thought that he was worried about his family, so didn't think much about it and lent him his phone. Zhu Buqing immediately dialed Sister Shuyan's phone number. Unfortunately, the phone rang several times, but she didn't answer it, so he had no choice but to call Qi Zhenbai right after. As soon as the call was connected, Zhu Buqing said excitedly with a shaky voice, "Zhenbai, I had a car accident. Sister Shuyan didn't lie to me. She was right. If I ever go out today, I'll be seriously injured or dead. She was right, so accurate. A.and S.S.She saved my life. The talisman she gave me, it really worked. My God, we really met an expert this time." Thinking of this protective talisman, Zhu Buqing's eyes glowed in excitement. His first thought now was to immediately buy more protection and safety talismans. This protective talisman was so powerful. He simply wanted to have as many as he could buy, knowing that this protective talisman was equal to a life. Zhu Buqing's entire being quivered at the thought of the power of this talisman. Chapter 50. Shopping Frenzy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Qi Zhenbai was talking about cooperation projects with representatives of other companies when he received the transferred call from Assistant Su. When he found a quiet place, he found out that Zhu Buqing had been in a car accident and was out of danger. Even a man as calm and composed as Qi Zhenbai was totally shocked. This accident wasn't as light as the tailgating before. It was extremely serious and odious, and it wasn't so easy to escape danger, especially when Qi Zhenbai heard that Zhu Buqing's car was burned down to its frames. Fortunately, he had held the talisman that the little girl had given him, so he was unharmed and wasn't burned to death. Qi Zhenbai's thick eyebrows twisted, and his piercing slender eyes underneath were as unfathomable and cold as a deep pool. He knew that Zhu Buqing wouldn't deceive him, but hearing this strange and absurd thing, he was still rather suspicious and skeptical. He even thought whether this was a trap and conspiracy that the little girl and her accomplice had set up for Zhu Buqing. When he thought of that stubborn girl's prediction to Zhu Buqing and how unlucky Zhu Buqing had been recently, Qi Zhenbai became more and more convinced that it was a trap. A sinister and ruthless shade flashed through his upturned, slender eyes, and his meticulous mind captured a great flaw. The brakes went out, which meant that the car was probably tampered with. Who would benefit most from Zhu Buqing's death? Qi Zhenbai never had second thoughts, and his slender eyes, which have always been majestic, narrowed dangerously. "It's good that you're fine. We'll talk about the rest later. Come here first. Don't get in contact with the little girl yet." "Okay." Zhu Buqing didn't think too much about it, and habitually obeyed his best friend, Zhenbai's orders. Others might harm him, but Qi Zhenbai never would. But he was a bit hesitant about not contacting Sister Shuyan. He still wanted to buy more protective and safety talismans and wear them every day so he wouldn't be afraid of encountering trouble when going out. Otherwise, if something like today happened again tomorrow and the days after, he really would be a dead man. Had he known earlier, he would have taken a few more talismans from Sister Shuyan whether he believed it or not. Without a talisman, what was he going to do when he has got a chill in the back? After hanging up the phone, Qi Zhenbai's beautiful face became heavy again. First, he dialed a number to get someone to investigate Zhu Buqing's car accident. Qi Shuyan saw 7 or 8 strange missed call alerts on her phone when she came out of the shower. She returned the call, but the person who answered it was a stranger and was also confused about her call, so she thought that the person must have called the wrong number. Qi Shuyan turned her computer on and logged into her Taobao dashboard as usual, but after seeing the huge number of orders and familiar customer accounts on top of one another, a few black lines slid down her forehead. She had gently reminded Yang Hongsheng and the others not to buy talismans on Taobao before. They'd been quiet for a while, but now, they were back to their old tricks again, so she quickly called Yang Hongsheng. "Young Master Yang, didn't I tell you to tell the others not to place orders on Taobao anymore?" Qi Shuyan looked helpless. "The Taobao system has given me a warning to keep down my spam sales, otherwise, the system will deem it as fraudulent activity." "Ahem, Master Qi, you're accusing us wrongly. We've really restrained ourselves. You see, we didn't even buy as many as we did last time. Besides, your talismans are really useful and also so cheap, so we unknowingly bought more." On the other end, Yang Hongsheng immediately complained of being wronged. Qi Shuyan only felt a headache and was at a loss when she heard this. "What are you guys buying so many for? It's not like you can eat them. Even if you have a large family, one each is enough." "How could that be enough, Master Qi? There are certainly not too many of these sorts of protective talismans." Yang Hongsheng replied and continued to complain, "Moreover, Master Qi, aren't there too few of the products you uploaded? It's not even enough for a few of us to snap up. I can't beat these guys every time, so why don't you upload more?" Qi Shuyan was really angry and amused. Instead of trying to get them to buy fewer, Yang Hongsheng complained about the lack of uploaded products. Could she upload a bit more? She knew that the rarer something was, the greater its value. If she did upload that many, the talismans and magic weapons would become worthless. Qi Shuyan said a few words to Yang Hongsheng, telling them to restrain themselves, and scolding him several times before hanging up. As soon as she ended the call, she looked up and saw a message on the Taobao platform system on her computer that another new customer had placed an order. Again. Because someone placed an order yesterday and the day before yesterday, the business had improved a little recently. Qi Shuyan pursed her lips. Excluding Yang Hongsheng and those troublesome four, there had been a few orders in succession recently. Qi Shuyan blinked. It had also been boring drawing talismans lately, so she would have to see what she could sell. The next day, Qi Shuyan was ready to go to school early in the morning when she heard the ringing on her phone. She opened the Taobao software on her phone and was dumbfounded. She had more than a dozen orders. The products that had just been uploaded a few days ago were sold out again. If it weren't for many customers urging her to restock, she would have thought it was Yang Hongsheng's work again. Qi Shuyan immediately uploaded another batch of talismans and magic weapons, this time adjusting the price higher, and closed the webpage. In a small villa where an inch of land was equal to an inch of gold in the capital, a teenager guarded his computer while repeatedly refreshing a page, and upon seeing the product page pop up, he quickly joined the new round of frenzied shopping. Damn it! These beasts are just too quick to beat. It's gone. Qi Yunxian threw the mouse, stomped his foot in anger and hatred, and cursed. Brother, do you still have that jade pendant magic weapon you bought last time? Qi Yunchang ran excitedly into Qi Yunxuan's room with a delicate, crisp voice. Qi Yunxian didn't even look at her and shook his head impatiently. He stared straight at the page until he was sure he couldn't buy products anymore. He sighed and said unhappily, "There's no more. The prices of these talismans and jade pendant magic weapons have increased, doubled. They've doubled, but there are still many people fighting over them." Ah! It has increased so fast. Wasn't it only 10,000 last time? Qi Yunchang looked at the page and was astonished. She immediately came back to her senses and acted cute towards Qi Yunxian. "Brother, don't lie to me. I remember you bought more than 10 pieces last time, didn't you? How could it be gone? I know I was wrong to call you a wastrel last time. How could I have known that this is actually really useful?" Seeing that Qi Yunxian was unmoved, Qi Yunchang immediately told him what had happened today, which caused her to feel a chill run down her spine. Brother, you don't know, but a terrifying thing happened today. Someone confessed to a good friend of mine before, but she rejected him. Who would have thought that the man was so sick that he brought a bucket of messy stuff and splashed it on her? I was almost hurt. Fortunately, that jade pendant emitted a green light and we escaped from it. Splashed something. He didn't splash sulfuric acid, did he? Qi Yunxian immediately got somewhat furious when he heard this. He had heard on the news about such horrible things as men splashing sulfuric acid on women who rejected them. No, it was just sh*t, but Shanshan and I almost threw up. Fortunately, all the feces bounced back on that man instead. Ha ha ha, he had it coming. Qi Yunchang recalled the sorry appearance of that man, and after her lingering fear, she complacently gloated over his misfortune. After feeling pleased with herself, she felt disheartened again. She had given them all to Shanshan, so naturally she couldn't take them back. Sigh, sister, it's not that I don't want to give you some. Qi Yunxian scratched his head in embarrassment and said, didn't my brothers laugh at me before? Once I found out that the jade pendant was useful, I couldn't resist showing it off to them, so they split them up one by one. The price wasn't too high, so I thought I'd buy more next time. Who would have known that the price would increase so fast? Brother, how could you do that? Qi Yunxian smiled in embarrassment. He suddenly thought of something and clenched his fists indignantly. Perhaps, the people fighting with me now over the talismans and magic weapons are these B*****Qis. Qi Yunchang.